Hi everyone, I want to give a lesson on paradoxes of leadership. There are 4 assumptions about the nature of leadership that are key to our course and us coming to develop a shared understanding. The first is that leadership is paradigmatically devised or derived. And by that we mean that it's derived through a lens a person views the world. So leadership is devised based on the lens in which you see the world. It's based on a set of commonly held beliefs and agreements shared about how to best approach a problem. So when we say it's paradigmatically derived, we mean this, is that it is based on the commonly set of held beliefs of an individual and then also of his or her community. So commonly held beliefs about Virginians or commonly held beliefs of Americans. The second is that leadership is socially constructed. It does not naturally occur. It can't be explicitly seen or touched, and therefore it's not hard science. It's not a yes or a no. It's understood based on an array of social interactions. Money as a social construct, gender as a social construct. Leadership represents an abstract set of concepts that are derived by people to explain and make meaning of observations. And so when we say that leadership is socially constructed, one of the things that becomes challenging for some people is that it's not definitive capital T truth, right? It's not that 1 + 1 always equals 2. It's a product of an array of people's perspectives and the way in which they construct reality. Third is that leadership is inherently values-based. The classic argument about whether Hitler was a leader is illustrative of the nature of values or lack thereof in leadership. Leadership is not simply that there are values. Leadership communicates which values are accepted and deemed important. So again, leadership is inherently values-based. We are not saying necessarily that it's void of values, but leadership is the term leadership involves an array of different values. Another thing I want to share with you is that leadership is interdisciplinary. It's putting disciplines in conversation with one another. So leadership doesn't represent only one discipline, such as psychology or sociology or history. We think about leadership in ways that groups manage complex problems, with strategy, in organizations, with people who have varying skills. And it's all nested in cultures and communities and mini subcultures, both organizational and community, that require skill buildings that advance the mission and vision of an organization to promote positive outcomes. So what I was just describing there includes the disciplines of business, of marketing, of management, of psychology, of sociology, of history, of public policy, etc. So you can see that leadership is interdisciplinary. It's not multidisciplinary, it's interdisciplinary, where it's putting many disciplines in connection with one another. There are an array of paradoxes of leadership, and I want to just describe a few to get our brains thinking about the paradox of leadership. Being a leader is complex, and leaders with great strengths also will demonstrate great weaknesses as well. We both admire and we fear power. We both admire and fear or are intimidated by leaders. Likewise, we yearn for self-confident, tough-minded, heroic leadership, yet we are also inherently suspicious of tough-minded, heroic leadership. We at times desire decisive, hierarchical leadership, but then there's other times when we desperately wish to have autonomy or even to be left alone. We want leaders who are like us, but we want to be able to aspire to be like them. So we want leaders who are like us, but are actually better than us in some ways. We yearn for leaders to serve the common good, yet simultaneously serve particular interests, our interests. And we lament the lack of leadership, yet we are harsh critics of the leaders that we get. We want leaders to tell us the truth, yet often we get upset with them when we do get the truth. We want effective political leadership, yet we wish we could have it without elected politicians. We value leaders who have a sense of humility and compassion, and yet we also know that sometimes It is the demanding perfectionist, the control freak with a personality that wants to win at all costs, who produce valuable breakthroughs. And we also ask leaders to resist being overly wed to the status quo, to tradition, or convention, yet we want them to possess a sense of history and a sensitivity to the human experience. We're impressed with leaders who display fearless resolve, yet we also respect those who are self-effacing, acknowledging their fallibility and learning from their mistakes. And leaders learn to live and cope with these contradictions. They learn to live in and cope with these contradictions. They develop their contextual intelligence. And it also often requires successive displays of these contrasting characteristics. So through a process of practice, leaders begin to develop these skill sets of living within these paradoxes. Leaders are constantly buffeted by competing demands and constituencies and policies, and they have to learn to balance in order to be effective. For example, compromise and patience may be necessary in one context, yet too much compromise or patience in others may be fatal or futile. Michael Powell, a person who I admire for his leadership skill and his success, often talks about when he has 90% of what he needs to know in order to solve a problem, he runs it through his principles, or his principles, and he makes a decision for the good of the organization. We're never going to get to 100% of what we need. There are a few fixed rules regarding leadership. It's mostly a moving target, and the study of leadership is more an art than a science. This is why life and leadership are about balance and flexibility and not about absolutes and rigidity. And it's also why study of leadership becomes complicated. The final thing I want to share with you right now is this idea that leaders have to be uncommonly active and attentive listeners. I like to say they must squint with their ears. And yet, they can't listen forever because we expect that sometimes, eventually, they have to act, they have to decide, and they have to make judgments. And sometimes they're going to make decisions that's not going to make everyone happy. Leadership divorced from worthy purposes is merely manipulation of deception, and in the extreme, the wielding of repressive and tyrannical power. Leaders who are hell-bent on success rarely ponder whether the ends justify the means. And so we'll leave with this. Do leaders occupy a different moral universe than the rest of us? Are leaders human as they are? Are they human in nature? Do they make mistakes, learn, and grow from it? Is leadership fixed? The answer to these questions is generally no. Leadership is not fixed. Yes, we continue to learn through a leadership journey, through a process of practice and reflection, action, and then practice again. That's just a general overview of the paradoxes of leadership, and I look forward to talking about it more.